and welcome to the ELG workshop at SwissText 2021. We had a similar event last year at the joint SwissText and Convents 2021. That was very popular. We had a good discussion, and that's why we decided also to have the event again this year. And thanks so much to the organizers for having us again. So my name is Georg Rehm, and I will be chairing this workshop. The agenda can be seen on the slide here, which I hope you can all see. Essentially, it's a very simple setup. We have 3 blocks. They go like this. First of all, I will provide a brief overview and introduction of what ELG, this EU project and this wider initiative is. My colleague Remi Calizzano will then give you a brief mini tutorial. We could extend this for quite a bit of time. We decided to do it in a mini way, in a short way, in a brief way, how to integrate functional services running ELG platform tools into the system. So I guess this is a very convenient and effective way how to learn how to do this yourselves, because this is a project for the whole European community, and we want this to be a platform for the whole European community, and we want to enable all of you to make use of this platform for your own purposes. So in the second block, we have 2 speakers from Austria and Switzerland, respectively. At about 9:50, our colleague Dagmar Grohmann, who's also the national representative for Austria, the National Competence Center. Dagmar will present one of the 15 ELG pilot project that she happens to run, one of the 15 extracting terminological concept systems from natural language text. And then Martin Volk from the University of Zurich and the company Text Shuttle will talk about collaborative potential of Text Shuttle and the European language grid. And then towards the end, we have another half an hour earmarked for a general discussion period and question answers. And then we will end at the latest at 11 o'clock. So this is the concept and the agenda. It's pretty straightforward, I guess. Thanks again for joining us on this, at least in Berlin here, lovely Monday morning. And yeah, let's kick things off right away. So European language grid, I could talk about this for days and weeks. In fact, I have already talked about this for days and weeks in other occasions. In the next 20-25 minutes, I will give you a brief overview of the origin, the history, the context of this project, because it's not just a singular project. It's a wider initiative and a wider series of projects in a way. I will then focus upon ELG in the main part of the presentation. I will briefly talk about its sister project, European Language Equality, which is surely interesting and relevant for many of you. And then I will conclude with a couple of concluding remarks. And in between, I have a demo. I think the demo is listed in the agenda as a separate item. It is embedded in this presentation. So what is our point of departure in this workshop and in ELG at large? It's multilingualism in Europe. We are all aware that multilingualism is a cornerstone and an important ingredient of the European idea, the European Union. We have 24 official European Union languages, and they all have the same status. They all operate on the same level. There's not this one language that is better or more spoken or spoken by more people. They're all the same. Additionally, we have dozens of co-official languages. We have regional languages. We have minority languages. We have languages of immigrants and trade partners and tourists and various others. This multilingual web, this multilingual initiative, and this multilingual setup creates quite a few challenges, economic challenges, social and also technical challenges with regard to the digital single market, for example. Yeah, if we have a digital single market which consists of various individual markets that are tied to a specific language, then we won't have a digital single market. Yeah, then we will have 24 or something markets that are operating in their specific language silos, which probably is not what we want. Cross-border, cross-lingual, cross-cultural communication, especially in the last couple of years, has been a big issue. And this is more like an internal challenge. The fragmentation of the European language technology market and landscape is, for the lack of a better term, intense and extreme. And we need to do something about this very, very stark fragmentation in the market. To do something about this, we already started about 12 years ago with a project called MetaNet, or T for Me. We wanted to establish the technological foundations of the multilingual European Information Society. We published the MetaNet white papers and the SRIA, and we had different follow-up projects, but then it took quite a bit of time until the penny really dropped in Brussels and in Luxembourg, with the recent meaning 2018 European Parliament resolution that I will talk about in a few minutes. So yeah, this whole series of projects and now European Language Grid essentially originates in 2010. So in MetaNet and MetaShare and these various other activities that you are probably aware of. And the most recent ones are now European Language Grid, at the right-hand side of the slide, European Language Grid, and the recently started European Language Equality Project. So one of the main outcomes of MetaNet was this block of books here, over 3,000 pages in total, the MetaNet language white papers, Europe's languages in the digital age, where we had a look at 31 European languages and the technology support for these languages. We found out that there is, when we position the support, the technology support on a 5-point scale, excellent support does not exist for any of the languages in the 4 categories that you see on the slide. And then we have quite good support for English, and then moderate support for a couple of other languages spoken by quite a few people in Europe and also beyond. And then there's this long tail of languages with either fragmentary support or weak or no support at all through language technologies. If we visualize it like this and break it down into one graph, not 4, then we have a good support for English, and then this long tail of other languages, which is probably not the situation that we want to have in a European Information Society where all languages operate on the same level. So that study we did back in 2011, 2012, in the meantime, deep learning happened. And with neural technologies, the situation has changed dramatically, but not really in terms of equality or balance of technology support, but just, yeah, there's just a little bit more. Yeah, there's more support for English, there's more support for French and Spanish, and for example, for Welsh and Maltese and Lithuanian and Latvian and Icelandic on the right-hand side of the spectrum. But overall, the bigger picture is that everything remains essentially the same. But there is a bit more, of course, happening thanks to deep learning. And then approximately 2.5 years ago, this resolution, it's a short 10-page document, went through the European Parliament called Language Equality in the Digital Age. This is it's a resolution, typical Parliament style, in which 45 recommendations are put forward, such as, for example, create a European language technology platform for sharing of services and sharing of data sets and resources, and that we should also, or that Europe or the European Commission, it's a suggestion from the Parliament to the European Commission to set up instruments and calls to enable and empower European SMEs to use language technologies, which is obviously the right thing to do. And there are many, many other recommendations in this document, and it went through the parliament with a landslide vote of 592 yes votes and only 45 no votes, which is essentially unheard of, happens very rarely with such a large majority. And yeah, we can still see and feel the effects of this quite important document that went through the parliament. And shortly after, we set up this new project, European Language Grid, with the main purpose of excuse me, establishing the ELG platform as a cloud platform, as the primary language technology platform and marketplace in Europe to tackle the fragmentation of the European landscape. And we associate a couple of objectives and goals with the projects, such as that we want to have ELG as a platform, both for commercial language technology development and also for non-commercial, meaning academic language technology development. More on the applied research and innovation and research side of things, not so much basic research, because these are supposed to be industry related or industry relevant technologies that we want to have in ELG. This way, we want to enable the European community, the European LT community, to upload services, to upload data sets, to deploy them, and to connect with and make use of those resources made available by others. This is the timeline of the project. We are now almost exactly in the middle of the third year. As you can then see and infer from the graph here, we already had a couple of conferences. We have pilot projects and services that were compiled and have been ingested in data sets too. And the second release of the platform has been made available. We extended the project by half a year until June next year. So we have about 1 year and 2 weeks left in the project to accomplish all our goals. And just want to emphasize the bottom right-hand corner here that we, of course, won't switch off the whole system and platform at the end of the project, but that we will spin out our own not-for-profit legal entity that will then take over maintenance and extension and marketing and so on of the European Language Grid platform. This is about as technical as it gets in this presentation, the architecture diagram. I'm not going into the details, just a few keywords. The whole platform is based on a sizable Kubernetes installation that runs in the data center of a Berlin cloud provider called SYS11. On top of this, we have an extensive platform backend with all sorts of things built in that you need for running such a platform. Most of these components we developed ourselves. We are now in the process of integrating billing, at least as an experimental component. We have user management, we have monitoring and analytics and metadata harvesting to attach other repositories to our own ELG catalog. And a very important piece of the puzzle is the LT Service Execution Orchestrator, which allows us to run functional tools within the platform. Yeah, and these can be machine translation tools, summarization, NER, speech recognition, speech synthesis. All of these services can be integrated into the platform and then run through the platform. And yeah, this essentially addresses everybody in the whole European LT landscape, from research groups, smaller research groups or larger ones, those especially that don't run their own cloud platforms to showcase their technologies, but also companies. And many companies don't have a cloud system and they can simply use ours for this purpose. Current state of play is that ELG Release 2 was made available at the end of March 2021, and we are now working on Release 3. So just a quick glance at where the platform stands right now. This is a screencast that we did, I think already in January, and it showcases what the platform looks like. It has changed a little bit in between. So the user interface was polished, I think, twice even in between. So, and it's even built as release 1 still. So when you click this big button, then you can access the ELG catalog. On the left-hand side, you can see various facets, such as languages, service functions, language resources and technologies, different types of resources, such as corpora or models, and then in the functional side of things, machine translation or summarization on NER. And then you can simply access the different resources that we have in the platform. This is a German NER dataset that you can download right away from ELG. It's hosted in ELG, so we can also host and make available in a persistent way datasets and corpora, big and small. We are now, the next example is sentiment analysis by our project partner expert system, where you have lots of metadata, the languages that it works in. You can even try this service out on the website and through the website. Here you get a negative sentiment for this piece of text. We explain how you can use this service using a REST API with the needed access token. This is another example named Entity Recognizer. This is now for French, for the French language. Another example, and the entities are being highlighted. And of course, as I mentioned, you can do the same through the REST interface and the REST APIs, and then simply with a couple of lines of Python code, use this in your own code, which is quite nifty. This is a machine translation example. And I just want to show you one more thing here. This is a dependency parser that was developed in Prague by Jan Hajic and his team. So we can even expose to the user graphical interfaces through a simple iframe. We push this through from the service, and then in this example here, users can simply explore the dependency tree, or the dependency graph rather. So that was what I wanted to show you. What we don't have in this screencast is how to make these things available yourself. Yeah, how to upload a service, how to upload a data set, how to describe a data set using metadata. My colleague Remi will talk about this in the tutorial a bit more. Yeah, and so let me just simply skip the rest of this, and then I can show you what you can really do with it in one slide. Just to highlight the main functions and features of the ELG platform. So data consumers can search and browse the catalog to find the right types of data or corpora or language processing services that they have a need for. They can download the data depending on the access conditions. Obviously, service consumers can try out and test language processing services. They can call a service from the command line, view code samples, and there's API support right now through what we call our generic ELG APIs for machine translation, information extraction, ASR, TTS, and text classification. Right, and maybe to mention data providers and language technology providers, they can make their own research outputs or products or tools available through ELG. By now we have a really good and solid process for this in place, where you make something available, you upload it, and then it goes through a brief technical review phase. It will be validated technically, and then it will be published in the ELG catalog, as we call it. Technology tools are made available as Docker images. Okay, the ELG Python SDK, you can simply install it using PyPy if you're a Python person, and you can do many typical ELG functions then through Python using this interface. Of course, this is meant to be a community platform for the European language technology community, from the community. So we address quite a large number of users and stakeholders, companies that develop language technologies, companies that integrate them, and also companies that purchase language technologies. And that's, of course, the biggest basket of them all, because it's essentially almost every company that we have in Europe that needs language technologies sooner or later. And then again, universities and research groups that develop language technologies. So it's a challenge. Let's keep it at that. Yeah, it's a big challenge to address as many as possible of these. One way that we've been doing of getting this done, because the European LT industry is so big and fragmented, many of these companies operate in niches and which are based on application type or language or region. And we want to bring all of these companies together under one big umbrella platform, ELG, also with the help of the 32 national competence centers. And together with these 32 national competence centers, we compiled quite a few lists. And one of these lists is a list of more than 900 European companies working in this space, working in European language technology. And what we've done is we took this list, we imported it in ELG, and then we sent out messages to these 900 plus companies, and we invited them to use ELG as an active user. And this is happening as we speak. And yeah, on a daily basis, we are getting new entries in the ELG catalog where people claim their own pages and make them their own. Yeah, this is really nice. This is an older slide, but now we have more organizations and also more projects in the platform. But just to highlight, because it's something that is not really clear, I think, to many people, that we have such a wide spectrum of companies working in Europe in this space. And this is only those that we found. Yeah, there are many more that we probably haven't found. Okay, let me, in the interest of time, maybe skip this slide. Essentially, what it says is that we collaborate with many different European projects in this space, from language technology proper to the fringes and edges, from AI to minority languages to linguistics and multilingualism and language learning, to open science and big data, and so on and so forth. Right, I mentioned the European Language Grid NCCs. This is a strong international network of national networks to broaden ELG's reach. And here you can see the names again and the faces again. Our conference series Metaforum that we started with MetaNet is still being continued by ELG. It's still running strong. Last year we had the first virtual conference due to the pandemic, obviously, which went quite well. These photos are, as you can probably guess, from the previous year, 2019. The conference last year was fully recorded, like this meeting today. And if you're interested in doing a couple of deep dives into some of these topics, feel free to check our YouTube channel, where you can check out all these different screencasts. We had about 350 participants last year, and it was an exciting event. If you want to participate this year, we haven't really announced this yet in a public way. Metaforum 2021 will take place on the 15th, 16th, and 17th of November. And then next year, Metaforum 2022 will be on the 8th, 9th, and 10th of June. This will be, so the first one this year will be a virtual event again, and next year, hopefully, a face-to-face event again. And this conference next year will be organized together with European Language Equality. I want to briefly mention our open calls for pilot projects. Maybe you're aware that some European projects have a mechanism called FSTP, financial support to third parties, which means that a project is essentially its own funding agency, and they can publish calls for pilot projects or satellite projects. Depends on the overall EU project, how these are called. And we did the same in ELG, and we had 2 open calls. As you can see on the slide, 1.3 million euros in the first one and about 600,000 euros in the second call. We were flooded with proposals, which is a great success and also indicative of the fact that we need a big umbrella platform and more funding for our topics. And these are the projects that we selected. Each proposal was evaluated by 3 independent experts. And I think the first couple of projects are now finishing up, such as the MKS as linguistic linked open data is finishing up, and the Basque speaking smart speaker based on Mycroft AI is also finishing up these days. Yeah, and it's an interesting mix. We even have projects on sign languages and motion capturing for sign language, resource creation, and so on. It's a very interesting and good mix of pilot projects. And these projects will develop and will produce data sets, that will produce services, additional data sets, for example, for the Italian language, which can then be integrated into ELG, where others can then find them, discover them, find them, check them out, download them, and make use of them in their own research, in their own products, in their own tools. And this is not exclusive to the pilot projects. Everybody, all of you, you can do this. Please feel invited to do this. Of course, we will extend our PR activities this year to make this really known. This is by no means a closed shop. That's why we are doing this event and many, many others in Europe throughout the year and also throughout last year. This is an example. This is another DFKI project called Curator. It's a BMBF project, national project with partners here from Berlin. This project works on curation technologies, and it creates and develops many different resources and technologies. We set up in ELG a page for this project. So there is a page on the Curator project. We set up pages for all of these organizations here so that they are associated with the project. And what we can then do is to upload services, and we can associate them to a project so that we know in ELG with the metadata scheme which project financed which resources, which is also important for the national funding agencies. Yeah, so you can go left-hand side from the Curator page to the different entities or resources. It's not the best term, to the related resources or services that this project helped create. This is now an example, just 2. And on the right-hand side, you can then either download this BERT NER service for the German language or use it directly in the cloud. And we can do the same with any of what you want to make available through ELG. I mentioned that one of the things that we are now looking at and we are investing quite a bit of time in is the sustainability plan. Yeah, so we are working on a sustainability plan for ELG. This will be a not-for-profit company that we will establish next year. We have the business model canvas, which is it's an approach for approximating the most basic pillars of what such a legal entity needs to cover. This is prepared. We have a first set of products defined that we next up need to validate in the market through focus groups. So this is something that we are working on right now, and then next year the whole thing will start. Just a few words before I close on the sister project, European Language Equality, which is, this is wrong, it's not 53 partners, it's 52 partners. One partner had to drop out for formal reasons, coordinated by the ADEPT Center. And the goal and objective of this project, European Language Equality, is the development of a strategic research, innovation, and deployment agenda to achieve digital language equality in Europe by 2030. So this is not a research project, it's not a development project, it's a strategic project, it's a preparation project. Yeah, so we are developing a strategic plan. In a way, it can be conceptualized like the exercise we did about 10 years ago when we prepared the MetaNet strategic agenda. And this is now fully geared towards the topic of digital language equality, which we don't have in Europe right now, but which we do want to have in Europe in about 10 years' time. And this agenda will present a plan to the European institutions how to do this. And we have 52 partners in the project. They are all helping with their respective expertise and partners from the industry. We have partners covering all the different languages, partners with networks covering the minority languages and underrepresented languages, unofficial languages, and everybody is invited to participate in this in our public consultation phase, which starts in about 1 or 2 weeks. So to sum up, ELG is meant to be the primary platform and marketplace for language technology in Europe. This is not a closed shop. Again, I want to stress this. It's an initiative from the European LT community for the European LT community, because this landscape is highly, highly fragmented, and we want to provide an umbrella platform for this landscape, and then we can unleash lots and lots of potential, I think. The global market size, I haven't talked about this in the presentation today. The predicted global market size by 2025 is supposedly 42 billion US dollars, 42 billion, which is enormous. And we want the European community to be a key player. We can only do this with an umbrella platform, with a shared brand in a way. Yeah. So, and this is why we need to assemble behind this initiative, and then we can unleash many, many spillover effects. We want to increase the visibility and reach of all members of the European landscape. And this is clearly a long-term initiative for the whole European landscape. And we want to contribute to digital language equality through this umbrella platform that collects all services and resources for all European languages. Our next steps, I mentioned them, I think, all specification and validation of the ELG products for the legal entity, the organization of Meta Forum 2021 and 22, and then in early next year, we will also make available release 3 of the platform. If you're interested in reading more about this, check our online documentation. We have a couple of papers on the platform, on the initiative. And there will be 2 books coming out next year on ELG and on ELE. And the arrows pointing at this call for proposals, or call for papers rather. We are organizing a special issue of the Language Resources and Evaluation Journal on LT and NLP platforms. If you're working on this topic, please feel free to submit a paper. The deadline is at the end of August. Right, thanks so much, everybody, and also in the name of all the colleagues working in ELG and in the ELE project. If there are any questions right now, maybe we can tackle some of them, and if there are no questions, then I would hand over to my colleague Remi for the tutorial, but maybe there are questions. Just realized I can't see the chat. Is there anything in the chat happening? No. Okay, Remi, I will stop sharing and then over to you for what we call how to integrate services into the ELG. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope that you can see my screen. So hello everyone. So I'm Remi Calizzano from the ELG technical team, and today I will present you a mini tutorial on how to integrate services into the ELG platform. So as Georg said, ELG is running inside a Kubernetes cluster, and so every ELG services are running as Docker containers inside this Kubernetes cluster. Those Docker images are not directly accessible from outside of the cluster, and they rather communicate with a REST server that we called a LT service execution server. So this server can be called from outside of the cluster using an API that we call the public LT API. and then the server will forward the request to the services using another API that we called the internal LT service API. This is what is happening when a user calls a service into the ELG platform. So the first step is that the user calls the REST server using, as I said, the public LT API, which is using specific JSON messages. Every specification and the API is available on our online documentation. And so after this first call, the REST server will forward the request to the specific service that will process the input and return the output again to the REST server. The communication between the REST server and the services are made using another API specifications, which is different from the public LT API. And so the last step is that the LT service execution server is returning the response to the user. So here, what is important to see is that we have two APIs, and when you will deploy a service into ELG, you have to make sure to fit the internal LT service API specifications, which are different from the public LT API. So a service running inside ELG have two technical requirements. The first one is that your service need to expose a ELG compatible endpoint, which means that you have to expose a HTTP endpoint, which is compatible with the internal LT service API specifications that I will explain in detail in the next slide. And so to do that, many frameworks are available for most of the languages. For example, for Python, you can use Flask or Fast API, and for Java, you can use Spring. And so the internal LT service API is just specific JSON format messages. So we have three types of request message: a text request, structured text request, and audio request, and four types of response messages: annotations, response, classification, text, and audio. And so we have constructed those messages to fit every LT service. But if you want to deploy a service into ELG that is not compatible with those type of messages, you can just send us a message and we'll find a solution to be able to work with our infrastructure. So on the bottom of the slide, I put some examples of JSON format of our messages. And so as you can see, it's quite simple to fit those formats. And yes, the important thing here is that every ELG LT services must use this request and response types, which means that they need to accept a request message and response message compatible with ELG. The second technical requirement for your ELG service is that your service needs to be Dockerized, which means that you just need to create a Docker image and then to upload it into any Docker registry you want. For example, GitLab, Docker Hub, or whatever you want, in order that our Kubernetes cluster can access the image and pull it to have it locally. We provide examples on how to Dockerize your service for Python and Java-based tool. You can look at those examples which are on our documentation. I will put all the links in the chat just after this presentation. The other important things to know before deploying a service into ERG is that we have 3 integration options. The first one, which is the most used one, is when you have everything packed into one single Docker image. When I say everything, I mean your service, but also the HTTP endpoint compatible with the internal LT service API. The second option is when you already have a Docker image of your service, which is exposing an HTTP endpoint, but this endpoint is not compatible with the ERG internal LT service API. So your Docker image is using your own API specifications. And for that case, you don't have to recreate a new image compatible with ERG, but you can simply use what we call an adapter container, which will simply convert your own API specifications to the internal LT service API specifications to make sure that your service can communicate with our REST server within the Kubernetes cluster. And finally, the third option is when you want that your service is running outside of the Kubernetes cluster for license purposes, for example. So this is, of course, possible for ERG. In that case, you will simply have to deploy into our Kubernetes cluster a proxy container that will be ERG compatible and that will forward the requests to your service running outside of the cluster. Now that we have seen the requirements and how to convert the service into ERG, let's dip into a very, very simple example with a language identification service in Python. So let's say that we want to create a ERG compatible service for our language detection package that we have made in Python. And so our package is working as follow. You can just simply import it and detect the language of a text. So the first thing to do, as I said, is to expose a ERG compatible endpoint. So here we will do that using Fast API and the Python SDK, but you can use any framework you want, and the Python SDK is not a requirement. It is just simplifying the process a bit. So on the left figure of the slide, you can see that we simply import Fast API, and from the ERG Python SDK, we will import the text request class and the classification response class. Those two classes are simply Python classes that represent the messages of the internal LT service API. So by using those two messages, you make sure that your service will be ERG compatible. After that, we just import our long detect package. We create the Fast API application, and we create our post endpoint. So here /process. So yeah, something I did not say that the endpoint you create for your service must accept post request and not get request. And so in our endpoints, we define our process methods that takes as input a text request message, again, to be sure that we will be ERG compatible. After that, we just process our language detection, and we create our response message accordingly to the classification response JSON format that I put on the right. So as you can see, we just create a list of classes, and for each classes, we put the name of the class and the probability score of our class. So here we just have one class, which is a language, and one score, which is the probability. And after that, we simply return our response, which is a classification response. The second requirement that we need to fill is to build our Docker image. This can be done using this Docker file that I put on the slide for our specific example. You just import the first API image, you install the needed Python packages. So here ERG and long detect our detection package. And that more or less it. By doing this, we can build our Docker image using this Docker file. And we will have our Docker image locally, which is ERG compatible. I did not put in that slide that you also need to push this image into a Docker registry in order that we can pull the image from our Kubernetes cluster. And this step is not required, but it's always better to test what we do. So we have made some tools within the Python SDK to test your Docker image locally. So how does it work? You can simply run your Docker image locally. You just have to expose one pore of your Docker image. And then from Python, you can simply import the service class, which is the class that we use to call the services. And initialize your service from a Docker image. And as arguments, you simply have to put the name of the Docker image, the HTTP endpoint, and the pore you exposed with your Docker run command. And once your service is initialized, we can test it by calling it with an example here, English text. And you can see that it is well responding a classification response. So if no error is raised, then you can be sure that your service here, your Docker image, will be ENG compatible and that it won't have an issue when we will deploy it into the Kubernetes cluster. So this was a simple example, but we have also made two other examples which are more, which are based on real use case, so which are more close to the reality. And all those examples are available on GitLab. I will again put the link into the chat just after the call. And in those examples, one example is using an audio service. So if you want to deploy an audio service into ERG, there is an example. And also one example is using the adapter option. So the people that wanted to deploy a service into ERG already had a Docker image, and we just create an adapter for their Docker image. So now that we have our Docker image, which is ERG compatible, let's see how we can deploy it into ERG and how we can create a new item into the ERG catalog. But before that, I just wanted to make a brief recall on the ERG roles that we have. So we have 3 user roles into ERG. So users that are not registered. So they can browse the catalog and see all published resources, but they cannot interact with those resources because this is only for consumers users, which is the default role. And for those users, they can interact with resources, so they can download a corpus or use a service. And the last role, which is a provider role, is a role that we are looking for here in our tutorial because it is a role that you will need if you want to contribute a resource into ERG. And in our case, if you want to contribute a service into ERG. And how to become a provider, nothing more simple. You just have to go to your profile page, and from your profile page, there is a button where you can ask to become a provider. Then it can take a couple of hours, just the time that we process your request just by adding you the roles from our user management tool. But once you are a provider, so once you can create new resources into the ERG catalog, you will have access to your grid from the European Language Grid platform. So from your grid, you can add a new item. This can be done through the interactive editor or through what we call upload metadata. So the interactive editor is simply a big form in which you will have to fill all your service informations. So the name of your service, the descriptions, the intending usage, the license, the name of the organization that's creating the resource, but also more technical information like the URL of your Docker image and the endpoint that you have created. And the second option is by uploading a metadata record. So it's exactly the same information that we'll have to put, but you can put all those information into an XML file that you directly upload into the platform. So the first option is more user-friendly, but sometimes it's better to have the possibility to upload directly a file. And once you feed all the information and that the metadata record of your service is valid, you can submit it for publication. After that, the validation process will start. And so 2 validators will be assigned to your service, one technical and a second validator which will just make sure that you have the correct rights to publish this service. And so the technical validator will then deploy your Docker image into our Kubernetes cluster. So this can takes a couple of days. We try to make as quick as possible, but yeah, sometimes it just takes a couple of days. So if after that the service is deployed into our platform, we test it using the tryout tab that Georg showed to you, but also from the Python SDK or directly using our REST API. If some issues are raised, we can communicate with the LT provider using a Slack channel just to see what we need to fix in the Docker image. And after that, everything is tested and that we are sure that the service is running correctly into our ELG platform, the tool is automatically published to the catalog. And so after that, the tool is publicly available and can be tested by consumers, users. And you will also see your service into your grid with a published status. Just to make a brief recall on the steps that you need to follow in order to integrate a service into the ELG platform. So step 1 is to create a Docker image of your service that exposes an HTTP endpoint compatible with the internal LT service API. The second step is to create a new item on ELG with information about your service and to submit the metadata record for publication. And the last step is more on the ELG side, but consists of deploying the service into the Kubernetes cluster, test it, and then make it publicly available for everyone. I hope that this new tutorial was clear and that you now know how to deploy your service into ELG. And I don't know if you have any immediate question. Maybe I can answer now, or we can do it at the end. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Remi. Right, are there any questions? Yeah, we know it's a lot of content compressed into 15, 20 minutes. So it's not even only compressed content, it's compressed technical content. So everything is available also in the ELG documentation, in the online documentation. We are also working on, what else do we do? On short explanatory videos that we are now producing. Remi is also taking care of this, and then pushing to YouTube. So on YouTube, you will find, by and large, a new video, a couple of minutes every couple of weeks. So we will also disseminate them through social media to get more and more interest. So any questions to Remi with regard to the technical integration? Remi, maybe you can briefly say a few words about how long it takes to make a service fit for ELG ingestion.
Yes, sure. It depends of the complexity of your service, but it only takes a couple of hours to make your service compatible with the ELG internal LT API, and then Dockerize the service is usually not an issue, as Docker is now a well-known tool by the community. And after that, so create a new item on ELG is also just a matter of minutes. And maybe as I said, the longer process is that we integrate your Docker image into our Kubernetes cluster. So as I said, this can take 1 or 2 days if everything is going well. But yeah, I think that in 3 days you can have your service available into ELG.
Great.
1 day of your work and 2 days for us.
Okay, that's good distribution of work. Thanks so much, Remi. Great. If there are no questions, then let's come to the second block of the workshop, and that's European Language Grid Perspectives from Research and Industry. First up is Dagmar Grohmann from the University of Vienna with a talk on the ELG pilot project that she's running in Vienna on extracting terminological concept systems from natural language text. Dagmar, great to have you. Thanks so much for doing this presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this great introduction. So I have the honor to present one of the many very interesting pilot projects. And I'll just start right off, if I can. Okay. So I would like to first very briefly explain what is a terminological concept system so that you know what we are extracting from text. It's basically a collection of domain-specific terms in one or several languages. So here we have a group of the term vaccine in 5 languages. And these are then grouped by concepts or into concepts and are assigned metadata and have a concept ID. And the purpose of this grouping is that you can relate words in different languages that have the same meaning to other groups of words with the same meaning. So here we can have a hierarchical relation from vaccine to biological preparation or biologisches Präparat. And we have an instrumental relation to immunity because vaccines serve the purpose of immunity. So the first is a hierarchical and the other one, the instrumental relation, would be considered a non-hierarchical relation. Why is this of any use at all? If you prepare information like this, it can help to avoid inconsistencies in specialized communication, because everyone knows in English, I'm supposed to say vaccine to describe this thing. And in Spanish, I would say vacuna. And in German, it's called Impfstoff. It also helps to structure existing knowledge, and it also can help to acquire new knowledge, because by just looking at this graph, I know what the more general concept is of this vaccine concept, and I can also know its purpose. And you can also extend existing knowledge. So this is really helpful in organizing knowledge across organizations and within an organization. When we do this from text, we have some kind of text, usually more than one sentence. And the first step is to extract all the terms. So in this sentence, a vaccine is a biological preparation that provides active acquired immunity to a particular infectious disease. We have vaccine, biological preparation, active acquired immunity, which is one term, and infectious disease, which again is one term together. And the next step is to find out all the different relations between the terms that we've extracted. So vaccine has this hierarchical relation to biological preparation, has an instrumental relation to active acquired immunity, and it is associated with infectious disease. So these are the kind of specified, pre-specified relations that we assign between terms in text. So this is a bit of an overview of the system that we proposed. We take text files, plain text as input. We have to detect which language it is because our system is multilingual. And then we need to extract all the different terms that we find in the text and group them by synonyms. And then the next step is to extract relations between those synonym groups. And finally, we output this concept system in terms of the term-based exchange format, which is a standard in terminology to represent terminological information. We also want to support RDF, the Resource Description Framework, and we already have a visualization tool in place as well, so that you can visualize the concept system that we've extracted. How do we do this? Well, first we had lots of ideas on how to use discourse representation theory and all sorts of more semantic, linguistic processing means. However, in the end, it turned out that pre-trained language models fine-tuned to this task work really well. So we rely on pre-trained language models such as BERT. However, we needed a pre-trained language model that can be applied across languages and domains. So we needed to use some kind of BERT-based system that's multilingual. And the best one on the market at the time when we were doing our main experiments was XLMR, R for Roberta. Roberta is a more robust training method for BERT. And XLMR has been trained on more than 100 languages. You might not be able to see it in the graph at the bottom, but all these different bars show you the different languages and how many files were used in terms of training data for each language. So it's highly multilingual. And that has advantages. If you fine tune in one language, it has amazing zero-shot abilities to do the same task in a completely different language it has never been trained on. We tried for term extraction 3 different variants of this base idea of fine-tuning XLMR. The first idea was we simply give the model all possible combinations and lengths of sequences. So if we have the sentence, we meta-analyzed mortality using random effect models, we would have to test all combinations of words in all lengths. So we would have we and ask the model whether we is a term or not. Then we would give it we meta-analyzed and we would ask again, is it a term or not? We meta-analyzed mortality and so on until the whole sequence and all possible n-grams in a sequence have been tested. And always ask the model, is it a term or not? So it's really binary classification. Since this is extremely time intensive because you have to build all possible n-gram combinations for each sentence in the text, we decided to also try another model, which was we let the model decide for each position in a sentence, whether it's not a term, the beginning of a term, or the continuation of a term. So in this sentence, we was detected as N, which means no term. Meta-analyzed was detected as beginning of term. Mortality, again, was analyzed as or predicted as beginning of term. Using no term, random effect, beginning of term, and models as a continuation of term. So it detected that random effect models is one term together. We also experimented with neural machine translation, where we basically trained the model to forget all the words in between that are not terms and just output all the sequences that represent a term separated by a semicolon. This worked perfectly as well, but the winner clearly was the token classifier because it was the fastest and the best performing. The neural machine translation model performed really well as well, but was a bit too slow and too large in comparison. However, in terms of accuracy, it performed really well. That is a paper that we recently got accepted as an ACL findings in 2021. We also experimented on relation extraction as a second step in this project. And we gave the model here, we also experimented with several models, but the XLMR was the best in the end. We would give it a sentence and two terms that are in this sentence, and then ask the model to predict, first of all, which type of relation it is from a pre-specified relation typology. And also the direction, is the relation from the first term to the second or from the second term to the first? So in this case, we have COVID-19 and cough in this direction. So COVID-19 can be seen as a cause for coughing, and we predict the causal relation. This is a paper that we have accepted at Language Data and Knowledge Conference 2021. We also tested neural machine translation, but again, it was extremely slow at inference time and quite too large for the infrastructure that we have available. So XLMR turned out to be the winning system here as well. So in the end, we also needed a model that is not able to detect relations on a sentence level, but also do this on a text level, because especially synonymy and generic relations frequently occur across sentences. So we also included a second model that is able to predict such context-free relations, just given two terms, predict whether they are in any synonymy generic relation or not. So in the end, what we get is a TBX file and also some visualization output. So this is one example of what this visualization looks like, where you have the synonyms grouped into concepts and then the relations to other concepts, such as here, COVID-19, coronavirus disease, 2019, causal relation, coughing and cough, and also causal relation fever. And those two are then again classified as symptoms or symptom. This, of course, would never have been possible without such an absolutely amazing team that this ELG pilot project funding permitted for this project. So without those great employees, we would have never gotten that far. Leonard Wachowiak with his very profound IT experience, Christian with IT and translation experience, and Barbara, who makes sure that our system is usable at all and how output something that really is considered a terminological concept system. So what are the main conclusions from this project? Well, structured and high quality terminologies contribute a lot to specialized communications and also translation, localization. Pre-trained multilingual language models are highly performant on each step, so term extraction and relation extraction. Joint sentence level extraction of terms and grouping them by synonyms and learning their interrelations is still challenging. However, we are still very happy that we managed to get this to work across more than just European languages as initially promised. So we support a very large number of languages at the moment. So thank you very much for your attention. And this will, of course, also be very soon on the ELG, 15th of July to be specific. And if you have any questions or would like to know anything more specifically, feel free to contact me.
Great. Thanks so much, Dagmar, for the presentation. It was a good overview. Any questions for Dagmar? Martin.
In order to start the discussion, you mentioned, Dagmar, that you have a person to ensure usability, and I was just wondering how you do that. And what is a usage scenario of your work?
So we ensure usability by manually building terminological concept systems from text. So it's really a lot of, on the one hand, evaluation. So how can you compare the things that we extract, because it's a stepwise extraction. So how can we ensure that the final concept system actually is a concept system? We do that by having a lot of people at our institute. We are a translation studies department, so we are very multilingual, which is great. And we had a lot of, so Barbara was taking care that we get enough manual evaluation material on the one hand, and on the other hand also that the tools that we use for this purpose, but also the final tool that we provide is actually usable in the sense of people know how it works, what the input is supposed to be, and what the output is supposed to be. Within the ELG, this is preset, so there's not much we can change in the interface, but we also want to ensure that we can also describe the types of inputs and outputs correspondingly and understandingly. But yeah, yes, in this case, usability had a lot to do with manual evaluation.
But it's not manual evaluation by a terminology department in some company, but it's usability evaluation within your department.
Well, I would consider us very much a terminology department, because I also teach and supervise thesis on terminology. So our people should be very proficient in terminology. And I think this is a very good, scenario to have terminology evaluated. Because our students are translators and they have to specialize in certain domains. And we had a lot of master students at the very end of their studies help us with this.
Can you say a few words, Dagmar, about what users can expect from the tool on the ELG side of things? So what can I do personally with the tool? Following up on what Martin asked, what can I do with the tool, and are there industrial use cases for the tool, or is it maybe too early for this, and maybe you need to do a bit more work to make it a fully, let's say, a tool that a company could use to take care of their in-house terminology, say?
I think this is very much an industry relevant, because I presented it at some other venues already, and always I had several inquiries by industries, about that, because there are a couple of companies that try to do exactly this, but haven't succeeded yet. So there are many use cases. So the one thing that we still want to do before the 15th of July is allow you to also integrate your existing terminology as a pre-step, and then have this merged into the final concept system. Thereby the company, because most companies have terminologies and would love to have concept systems, but it's just too manual labor intensive to do. So this is very valuable. And as far as we've had feedback, this is something that is extremely useful to industry to build concept systems, because it's so much faster to acquire knowledge and understand knowledge if you see it visualized with explicit relations than if you just have a list of terms with some definitions there. So I think there's a huge use case for this in industry as well.
Great, for sure. Yeah. And it's a notoriously complicated and difficult process and challenge to tackle. And it also needs attention over time. It's not that you do this once and then it will be set in stone. There will be changes and new words and new terms.
Well, and it's also that we don't guarantee that what comes out at the end will be 100% complete and 100% complete. But it already reduces the workload to finally achieve concept systems for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've kicked the standard, the state of the art in term extraction by far. We had like 30% more accuracy than all the challenges that have been done so far across 4 languages and 4 domains and 3 languages. So that was pretty good. And also for relation extraction, we've achieved way more than state of the art, but still, I mean, it's not 100% that we got. So you still have to manually check what comes out to be realistic. But I think it provides a good backbone to finally have something like a concept system for your company.
For sure, for sure. And if it's any consolation, humans are also not at 100%.
Unfortunately, yes. Otherwise, training those things would be easier.
Okay. Any other questions for Dagmar?
Yeah, I have another question. Thank you for the talk. That was really interesting. So you said you tried different domains, but I guess they are still all like kind of not super specialized domains, or are there any like, so for example, the medical domain, I guess they have like loads of super specialized terms, and that I know that that's really difficult to get the grip of this terminology. So can you maybe say a bit more about that?
True. No, we've tested only on super specialized domains. So
right.
The ones that we've created ourselves for further testing range from chemical formula descriptions to highly medical texts, to also corona-related texts. The ones that are publicly available, so we will also make our data publicly available, of course, but the ones that are already available are, for instance, from the term eval challenge last year, 2020, and they have heart failure as one domain, and then they have, I don't remember the name, sorry, I forgot, dressage. There's a specialized term for horseback riding, you know, like highly specialized horseback riding, dressage kind of. So they were really windmills, you know, like really specialized domains. So we've only trained and tested on specialized domains in different languages.
Okay, yeah, super interesting. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Great. Any other questions for Dagmar? If there aren't any, then we can move over to Martin Volk from the University of Zurich and the company Text Shuttle with a talk on the collaborative potential of Text Shuttle and ELG. Martin, great to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides and can you hear me?
Positive, both.
Okay, super. I'm starting to tell you a little bit about Text Shuttle and then I'll try to bridge to the European Language Grid. Our company was founded a bit more than 10 years ago, and we participated in a European Union project, ZUMAT, subtitling by machine translation, which ran from 2011 to 2014. And we have been actively developing machine translation system, marketing them since about 2015, 2016. Currently, our staff is 9, so we're still a small company. Samuel Leubli is Chief Technology Officer, and Simona Todesco is the, can you guess the acronym here, Head of Operations. So just a few nice titles to start with. And we are based in Zurich, and this is, of course, wonderful because we are in the middle of a number of languages around us. German, Swiss German is the language spoken in Zurich. And then in the west of Switzerland, we have French. And in the south, we have Italian. And the fourth official language of Switzerland, Romansh, and we'll come back to this in a minute. So what is the focus of Text Shuttle? Well, it's tailor-made neural machine translation systems. So for each of our customers, we would build a specially adapted, optimized system based on their needs and trained on their training data. And we use the latest NMT technology that is of course, important in order to compete with much bigger companies and online systems and so on. And this ties nicely in with what Dagmar was just talking about. If a customer has a terminology database, our system allows to integrate that in the neural machine translation process. And this is something that customers very much appreciate. So we're not in the business of terminology extraction. We leave that to Dagmar. But we are in the business of integrating whatever terminology the companies come with into the translation system, so that as soon as an entry is in the terminology database, it is automatically used in the machine translation process. The next argument for a small company like TextShuttle is that we do on-premise installation. That means we are building a machine translation system for a particular customer, and this machine translation system can run over the cloud. But if the company has a high security requirement, as some of our customers do, well, then it's better to install the system within the company intranet and run it there, so that the data never leave the company. So, what is our vision? Where do we want to go? Well, we care for low resource languages, amongst others for Romansh. And Romansh is the fourth official language of Switzerland, has about 30 to 40,000 speakers. And we have built a first machine translation system for translating from Romansh into German. Here you can see an example. And I'll give you a few seconds to read a few paragraphs here so that you see what the system currently does. Well, you might wonder, why does anybody use or need a machine translation system between Romansh and other languages if there's such a small number of speakers? But as Georg has pointed out earlier, it's a matter of language equality and fairness. And there is a canton, the canton of Graubünden in Switzerland, which actually has its one of the requirements that the documents from the parliament and all the official documents from the cantonal government need to be published in both German and Rätoromansch. And so there's quite a demand of translating between these two languages. In addition, there is a radio station, there is a TV program, and they have subtitles in the TV and so on. So there's quite a translation demand between these two languages, and TextShuttle is supporting this with this particular product here. Second, our vision says that we want to integrate translation memories, in particular fuzzy matches and machine translation. And let me try to illustrate what we're dreaming of. So this is not implemented yet, but our idea is, if you have a translation memory like this, there's a few subtitles in here, and you want to translate a new sentence like, maybe I'll meet him there, well, then the translation memory is suggesting a fuzzy match because it's in the system. Maybe I'll meet him tomorrow. You see it as the fourth line up there. And then tomorrow is highlighted because it differs from the input sentence. And you get the suggestion, vielleicht werde ich ihn morgen treffen. And then you need to change that suggestion currently manually in order to get the correct translation. Vielleicht werde ich ihn dort treffen. And this final step is something that we believe that machine translation systems can do. So to adapt a suggestion from the translation memory and make it perfect translation. Do not translate totally from scratch because there can be errors in the machine translation there, but use the fuzzy match and improve it in order to make it fit the text. There's other things that we are hoping to do. One is to integrate automatic text generation in machine translation. You know from recent publications of GPT-2, GPT-3 that automatic text generation has improved considerably in the last couple of years. We want to go in this direction. We want to allow for style, length, and readability options. So style can be formality, can be measurement units. Lengths can be something to include automatic sentence compression and summarization into machine translation, and also readability issues. Perhaps in the translation you want to do text simplification, maybe you want to do it on the same language. So automatic text simplification is another thing that we want to do. And we want to develop into a leading machine translation company. We need to set our goals high here. So text shuttle versus the European language grid. Well, of course, for a company like us, access to parallel corpora is an important asset. We use parallel corpora that our customers provide, but we complement that with freely available corpora, and anything in this direction is always helpful for us, especially with low resource languages. We work on awareness. We are organizing meetups, and this has been on hold now in the Corona times, but we will resume this in the fall. We do meetups here in Zurich where we invite speakers to talk about best practices, and their speakers that we obtain through the European Language Grid could be very interesting for us as well. We haven't had an attendance of around 100 people usually showing up to these meetups. And anybody in the audience here would like to sign up for this, please do this. It's on the Meetup website. It's called Meetup Zurich, Machine Translation Zurich. You can do that. We are organizing continuing education courses on machine translation and artificial intelligence. I'm coming back to this in a minute. And we want to join forces with text and speech translation. Currently, Text Shuttle is focusing only on text translation. I believe the future will also be on speech translation. And maybe within the European Language Grid, we can team up with other companies that have more expertise in speech translation. And finally, especially through our university department, we are interested in branching out to accessibility issues, working on sign language. I have an avatar here that shows you how to do signing automatically. You might have seen and noticed that she or it is not using the gestures in the face. It's only using gestures, but not in the face. And this needs to be improved for accessibility and for that makes this more usable for signers in practice. But we have worked on machine translation into Swiss German Sign Language at our university department. Now, a few expectations to European Language Grid. I'm coming to the end. We would love to see European Language Grid to support low resource languages more. Georg pointed out in the beginning that there is quite a curve for large languages that have all kinds of support, and small languages that have only little support. And in principle, and now I'm saying something a bit controversial, the support for the big languages should stop immediately, and we should invest all the money on the low resource languages in order to get to language equality in Europe. I know that this is a bit unrealistic, but in order to reach that goal, I think that's what would be necessary. I already mentioned that we're interested in different modalities, text, speech, and signed, and we're also interested in historical variants. And I've put our logo here on the right of Heinrich Bullinger, who is a local hero here in Zurich. He was a reformer in the 16th century at the same time as Zwingli, Calvin, and Luther. And he has been in mail contact with all these people. And his correspondence of letters received and letters sent is 12,000 letters. And we are currently working on digitizing this, and we want to translate the 16th century Latin and the 16th century German into modern German and English. And this is quite a challenge. And any support in this direction would be helpful. I should mention that this is not Text Shuttle. This is the university working on this. And of course, we're interested in working on local variants and in particular Swiss German that is now written in social media. But as you might know, it doesn't have a writing standard. It's interesting that the online systems like DeepL are actually able to translate Swiss German up to a certain point already. I think maybe they don't even know this, but since the German that they take as input is very robust to spelling variations, any word that looks like the word Geschichte will actually be translated into story. And so this is a song or a poem in Swiss German. And you see that quite a number of lines are really nicely translated here. So finally, I should mention that, allow me this little advertising here in the end, that we are doing this continuing education program on translation technology and AI. And if any of you are interested in participating, please get in touch with us. The next round starts in October 2021. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Martin, for the great presentation of your company, what you're currently doing, and also your expectations towards ELG. It was super helpful. And I absolutely do need your slides. So if you could send me your slides as food for thought for our next discussions. I mentioned earlier that we are now defining the ELG products, and there's quite a bit of good input here for this exercise. Are there any questions for Martin? Or the microphones stay red. So let me maybe ask one. Coming back to Dagmar's presentation, you mentioned, Martin, that you're producing highly customized and tailored MT. Maybe you're calling yourself a boutique MT shop. If you produce these highly specialized MT systems for a customer and they even work on premise, what do you do in terms of maintaining these systems? So terminologies change, we've learned, and they need to be maintained. What about half a year later, 1 year later, 2 years later? How do you deal with evolving terminologies and evolving text types, evolving styles and standards and expectations?
Well, evolving terminology, that is taken care of because our system basically hooks up to the terminological database that the company has. So as soon as somebody enters a new term in there, it's immediately available for the machine translation system. So that is easy. The other question, of course, is new translated text, the company going into a new direction. I mean, you saw, for example, that Obi, the Baumarkt, the do-it-yourself market, is one of our customers. Now, let's assume they haven't had bicycles in their, I don't know if they sell bicycles, but let's assume they haven't had bicycles in their products, and now they do that. So now they have new translation, and that, of course, means retraining the system at the moment. This is not automatically done. People have to, customers have to buy that basically from Text Shuttle to do regular retrainings, and that can mean anything from every 3 months, every half year, every year, depending on customer needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, nice, thank you. Are there questions?
And that is, of course, maybe I could also openly say that this is, of course, a desideratum from these customers, that they would much rather have it immediately integrated, so that every day the new translations, the new corrected translations, whatever they have done, is immediately available. But currently, we're not offering this. And since also it's sometimes a quality issue that you need to make sure that whenever you do the retraining, the system is actually improving and not getting worse, we are a little bit careful to offer that kind of service. We know that some other companies are doing that, but we think it's a bit risky, and therefore we are currently not offering this. For our customers, that seems to work out. So especially in the beginning, when we have new customers, we recommend that they do retraining more often. Once everything is in place, I think retraining every half year is usually fine.
Okay.
Could I ask two small questions? Mm-hmm. The first one is, I find this sign language application you showed at the end very interesting. I'm not an expert in sign language, but I presume there are also some Swiss German specifics, right, to sign language. So do you have enough training material? Is this deep learning based? And the second question, is it hooked to the machine translation part? Like, can you actually go from text to sign language already?
Well, the thing that I'm showing you was a PhD project going from German text into Swiss German sign language. Since, I mean, there is a Swiss German sign language, there's a Swiss French sign language, German sign language, and so on. There's many sign languages. And of course, the training material is the real bottleneck in this. This system was still done with statistical machine translation a few years ago, and was focusing on announcements from the Swiss railway system, because we thought that people in the train stations, they cannot hear what is announced, that a train has changed from platform 5 to platform 8, or is canceled today, whatever. Then the mobile phone will be vibrating. If it's ringing, it doesn't help. It will be vibrating, and then you can see the avatar signing this information that the train is now canceled for today or is moving to another platform. So this was the scenario. In the end, for organizational detail, it was never implemented in practice by the Swiss railway system. There's always a discussion between why can't the deaf people not get the information in written form, because most of them can read. But of course, sending it to them as artificially signed is closer to their native language. And so it's a little bit also the matter of language equality again. To provide that information as signed language and not as written language, which is, I would say, one step further away for them.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah, just want to quickly mention two ELG pilot projects working on this topic. So first is the company called Sign Time, based in Vienna. I don't know, 30, 35, 40 people or so working for the company, and they produce software that looks a little bit like the tool that Martin had in his presentation, and they will integrate a service into ELG where you can then highlight a piece of text or highlight a word or a concept or a term in a text, and then you get the word signed by a little avatar in a nice way. And the other sign language related project is by our colleagues in Brünn in the Czech Republic, and they are producing a corpus of using motion capturing, like these suits that you can see in the behind the scenes footage of CGI new movies. They are using these motion capturing techniques and 3D cameras to produce a data set of signed words, signed concepts for the Czech sign language. Yeah, so it's not Swiss German sign language here, so we can't fill that gap, but at least we are filling one of the gaps that we have. And I fully agree, Martin, that we need to take care of sign languages, and it's a large bunch of sign languages that we have in Europe, and we need to do more for these languages as well. But there are also, just want to mention that there are at least 2 European projects working on sign language technologies, which is also great.
Right, and here we saw translating from text into sign language, but of course, as Georg already indicated, going in the other direction is also very, very interesting. A signing person standing in front of a counter somewhere, wanting to buy something, wanting to complain about something, and the other person not understanding his signing. And then having a device to show this person behind the counter what the signing actually means. So to go from the sign to a textual or spoken variety is very interesting. Again, I should mention we are not doing this in Text Shuttle. We're working on these things at the university in some research projects.
Very good.
I find it the last. Let me stress my last points here, because I find it from the research side very interesting to go and to use neural machine translation for other applications. And one other application is certainly automatic text simplification. I mean, you, Dagmar, you mentioned that you're using it for terminology extraction, or you've experimented with it for terminology extraction. And we see that this technology is very powerful and can be used in many different applications. And if nothing else, I would like to leave that as a take-home message that there is, I don't want to say endless applications, but many, many applications to come that people are doing with machine translation technology these days.
Yes, this is a good time to be in this field and a very exciting time. And especially now from my perspective, it's a good time to see finally that things get into motion on the European level after key decision makers in Brussels have been ignorant about the topic and the importance of the topic. And now they can't ignore it anymore. And there is active traction, active support, which is great. Otherwise, we will be crushed as European research from the left and the right, meaning from the US and also from companies in Asia. You've probably seen the announcement a couple of days ago, or a couple of weeks ago, the new Wudao language model, which is again order of magnitude bigger than GPT-3. And it's insane. This competition, I don't know if it's healthy. It's definitely not healthy for the environment, because I think GPT-3 took 360 or so GPU years to compute. The carbon footprint is insane associated with these large language models, and this competition is not really healthy. And I don't also think if it's scientifically interesting to get more and more and bigger and wider and more parameters, I don't know if this is something that is sustainable. So we need a European approach here, which maybe is a bit more efficient and makes a bit more sense, and puts the emphasis on other things than just parameter numbers.
I agree with you, Georg. At the same time, I think these initiatives do us a great service in advertising the possibilities in our field and giving us a great motivation. And also for our funders, they're very good to show what can be done and what in the end might actually be a result of our research. And at the same time, I totally agree with you that we need to find more energy efficient ways, more faster ways of training these systems in order to reach similar results.
And it's a big problem, right? So we need big groups of only engineers who know how to handle the systems, how to optimize the systems, take care of the storage. And then we're not even talking about research yet. And then you need the highly trained research engineers, and then you can tackle problems. And then before you know it, you have a team, necessary core team of 15 to 20 people who just take care of the systems. And so smaller research groups are already out of these questions. They can't compete, they can't participate. And even for bigger research centers, it's getting more and more difficult to participate in this game. Yeah, so you need the companies with seemingly unlimited resources who can just throw a couple hundred people onto these problems because it doesn't matter to them. So research, important research, is being monopolized by a few players on the planet, and Europe needs to do something to address this, I guess. But it's a big and complicated question, yeah, obviously. And we hope with ELG we can bring the community also closer together, and so that we can speak with one voice and do something about this. We are already in the middle of the discussion period, and we are discussing, so it's all fine. But maybe there are any other questions, comments, remarks, maybe requirements from industry or from research towards ELG, or the other two presenters were also aligned with ELG, obviously. Right, so that doesn't seem to be the case.
I mean, the only remark I have is always the same, you know, does ELG allow us to actually integrate existing terminological databases, you know, like does the communication even permit for it now?
Sure, you can make available in terms of data sets what you want. What we don't have right now are, let's say, TBX or terminology specific APIs. Yeah, maybe this is something that we want to think of. Right now we have APIs for machine translation, for NER, and maybe it could make sense to think about foreseeing some terminology specific APIs, so that you have something like a TBX database as a first-class citizen in ELG with specific APIs. I don't know if it makes sense. Maybe we can also think about it. Right now we are starting an internal discussion with other colleagues and the Pretalot project about RDF and triple stores, and maybe the TBX or terminology related discussion can also be handled in the by addressing triple stores and Sparkle and linked open data. And if we have a good solution for this, a generic ELG API for linked data in the system, and then maybe that would also address terminology databases. You see what I mean?
Well, it's especially important in terms of input, right? So that users can not only, you know, provide you with text, but also with their terminology databases. That will be quite crucial. And then there's the other side of the output, that you can actually send back, you know, visualizations and TBX and RDF on depending on the needs of the user. That would be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, there are some terminal or translation specific formats already in ELG. There's a lot of translation memory, you know, specific formats. So maybe it wouldn't even be so hard to also accommodate TBX. Yeah.
It's a good point. We are now looking at compiling a list of the needs. Quite a few colleagues mentioned the need for a question answering or QA API. So we're looking into this, and terminology and the functionalities that you described could also be a good candidate for this shortlist.
Okay, thanks.
I also had another question. It's more a very general question about ELG. So the last few years, when you submit a paper to, say, ACL or something like that, and especially if it's a resource paper, you always ask whether you want your new corpus to be integrated into, and I can't remember what it is, but it's some sort of NLP repository. And I don't think it's ELG. But so my question is, have you thought about doing something similar? Just because so far I wasn't aware of ELG at all. And I guess if you like explicitly ask people, do you want this to be integrated, then more people might be aware of it.
Which conference are you referring to? that prescribes the repository where to submit the resource?
I know it's definitely been at, I'm quite sure it was ACL, but it's like, I swear I've seen it at various of the big NLP conferences. I need to check again. I've definitely declared myself for like corpora I've published that they can be indexed in this.
Maybe it was LREC, and they were talking about the LRE map.
Maybe, but I don't think it was, no, I haven't had a paper at LREC, so it must have been other conferences.
Maybe. So I don't know any conferences that prescribe where to upload the resource. They usually say make it available, and then you can include a link, which is what you usually do. Yeah. And many colleagues use these days Zenodo for that purpose, but Zenodo is also a big, I wouldn't say it's a mess, but it's so big that it's difficult to find things. What we are now doing as ERG is we went through the whole of Zenodo and we integrated many resources from Zenodo into ERG. And what we also want to do is to do this automatically on a regular basis, so that we it's a bit messy and difficult, but we are trying to do this. We are doing the same with Opus, the MT collection or MT resource collection that is run by Georg in Helsinki at the University of Helsinki. So we are establishing a regular harvesting process with Opus so that everything in Opus is also in ERG and can be found through ERG. We are in early discussions with Hugging Face so that everything in Hugging Face will be also discoverable through ERG. And in the EL, I know many acronyms. So in the ELE project, this European Language Equality project, we are now working with all the different experts in the different countries working on their own languages so that they do the landscaping and they go out to collect resources, yeah, and many resources are on the website of a PhD student or on, I don't know, on some kind of exotic web server that happens to be running somewhere. For German alone, we have already compiled about 450 or 500 resources that are just decentralized, scattered around Germany, which will also go all into ERG, and colleagues in the different countries will do the same, so that hopefully, that's the ambition, hopefully we will get a complete and full repository of all, meaning really all resources available in Europe for Europe's languages in ERG. So if we have them, just as a thought experiment, if we have a complete inventory of all resources available for our languages, then we can do this exercise with plotting out the graph of technology support very easily. Yeah, we just need to write the script, click a button, and then we can see not only us, but also the powers that be in Brussels. Yeah, so we can show them, okay, this is the current state of play as of now. And we have English and then maybe French and Spanish and maybe German with slightly lower bars, and then this long tail of languages with very little support. And this is what we want to achieve until next June. And of course, we want to also have the ability to offer colleagues such as yourself the option of uploading and making available resources through ERG. Yeah, so essentially, we need the snowball effect to be fully in place so that everybody knows about ERG. So I'm happy that we could inform you today about this initiative, and hopefully in, I don't know how long it will take, maybe 2 years, maybe 3, maybe 4. And then everybody will know about ERG. Everybody will go to ERG first if they need a new data set and not to Google. Maybe that's at least my ambition here. Yeah, so that we have a one-stop shop and that it's the first one that people think about when they think about European language technology.
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool to hear that you're also like chatting to Hugging Face and those repositories. Cool, thanks. Thanks
for your question.
Georg, I have to leave for another meeting. Thanks for organizing here this morning. I will send you the slides. Dagmar, nice to see you again. And Claudia, thanks for your questions. Bye for now.
Nice to see you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Okay, I also have the next meeting already in a couple of minutes, so Zoom makes it possible, right? Otherwise, we would have a coffee now together. Thanks so much for your interest. and your time. Martin is already gone. Okay, Dagmar, thanks for your presentation. Remi, thank you as well. Thanks to the participants. And if there are any questions later on, just please don't hesitate, reach out and just send us an email, then we can talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next year. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.